Welcome back, everyone. We're glad to have you here with us. Tonight, we turn our eyes skyward to the restricted airspace above America's most secretive desert, where conventional aircraft end and something far more mysterious begins. The skies around Area 51 have witnessed decades of unexplained lights, impossible maneuvers, and craft that seem to defy the very laws of physics we thought we understood. What separates experimental military technology from something truly otherworldly? How do you tell the difference between a classified prototype and a visitor from another world? You decide. Share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's lift off into the forbidden skies above Groom Lake, where every shadow could hide the future of flight itself. Chapter 1. The Skies That Hide Secrets. Above the Nevada desert, there exists a patch of sky unlike any other on Earth, restricted Area 4808 North. R4808 North, as it appears on aviation charts, if it appears at all. To most pilots, it's simply a box drawn in red ink around empty air, marked with warnings that mean one thing: stay away. But this isn't just restricted airspace. It's a carefully constructed vault of sky, engineered for secrecy as deliberately as any underground bunker. Here, above the pale expanse of Groom Lake, the United States has created the most controlled aerial environment in the world, and in that control lies both explanation and mystery. The boundaries stretch across hundreds of square miles, extending far beyond the visible borders of Area 51 itself. From the ground, you might see nothing more than distant mountains and empty desert. From above, the full scope becomes clear. This is a nation within a nation, a bubble of absolute authority where the normal rules of aviation simply don't apply. No commercial flights cross this space. No private aircraft are permitted entry. Even military pilots require specific authorization and mission codes to enter. The Federal Aviation Administration's charts mark it with the kind of stern language usually reserved for nuclear facilities or foreign borders. Unauthorized entry is prohibited. Violators will be intercepted. Use of deadly force authorized. Yet for all its official warnings, R4808 North appears deceptively ordinary. On clear days, you can see across its entire width from the legal observation points on surrounding peaks. The sky looks like any other stretch of Nevada blue, but that emptiness is carefully maintained, monitored by radar systems that track every bird, every aircraft, every piece of debris larger than a softball. The radar coverage isn't just comprehensive, it's layered. Multiple stations create overlapping fields of detection, ensuring that nothing enters the airspace without immediate identification. Surface-to-air missile systems stand ready to enforce the boundaries, though their exact locations remain classified. The message is unmistakable. This sky is owned, controlled, and defended. Electronic monitoring extends beyond simple radar. Communications intercept systems scan radio frequencies for any unauthorized transmissions. Aircraft identification systems automatically query any approaching vehicle for proper codes and clearances. Even satellites passing overhead are tracked and their imaging capabilities noted, ensuring that sensitive activities occur only when electronic eyes aren't watching. The geography itself serves as the first line of defense. Mountain ranges create natural barriers on multiple sides, channels that funnel approaching aircraft into predictable approach routes, where they can be monitored and intercepted if necessary. The Nellis Air Force Base Complex, of which Area 51 forms a part, encompasses over 3 million acres of restricted land, creating a buffer zone that extends far beyond any single facility. Within this protected airspace, The conditions for testing experimental aircraft are nearly perfect. The dry desert air provides excellent visibility and minimal weather interference. The high altitude reduces air density, ideal for high-performance flight testing. Most importantly, the vast open spaces allow for flight patterns and maneuvers that would be impossible in populated areas. The historical precedent for such secrecy stretches back to the 1950s, when the Central Intelligence Agency first established Groom Lake as a testing site for the U-2 spy plane. At the time, the aircraft represented a breakthrough in high-altitude reconnaissance, capable of flying higher than any known fighter could intercept. But its very existence had to remain secret from foreign powers, particularly the Soviet Union. The success of the U-2 program led to even more advanced projects. The A-12 Ox Cart, capable of speeds exceeding Mach 3, underwent years of testing in the same protected airspace during the 1960s. Later came the F-117 Nighthawk, the first operational stealth fighter, its angular geometry designed to defeat radar systems through shape rather than speed. Each of these aircraft, when first tested, must have appeared otherworldly to any unauthorized observer. The U-2's impossibly long wings and glider-like proportions, the A-12's dart-like fuselage and massive engines, the F-117's faceted surfaces that reflected light in sharp, unnatural angles, all would have seemed to defy conventional aircraft design, at least until the public learned of their existence decades later. This pattern of concealment and eventual disclosure raises the central question that has haunted Area 51 for generations. What flies in those skies today? If history is any guide, aircraft currently undergoing testing are likely decades ahead of anything the public recognizes. Propulsion systems, materials, and flight characteristics that would seem impossible by current standards. But there's another possibility, one that transforms mere speculation into something far more profound. What if some of the craft being tested didn't originate from human engineering at all? What if the same infrastructure that successfully hid the U-2 and A-12 is now concealing technology recovered from sources beyond Earth? The controlled airspace would be ideal for such testing. Total isolation from public observation, complete control over who sees what, and the ability to explain away any leaked sightings as classified military projects. In this scenario, R4808 North becomes more than a testing ground for advanced human technology. It becomes a laboratory for understanding and perhaps replicating craft from other worlds. The security measures certainly suggest something of extraordinary value. The layered radar, the surface-to-air missiles, the communications monitoring, the electronic countermeasures. Such elaborate protection seems excessive for conventional aircraft testing, no matter how classified, unless what's being protected truly represents a breakthrough that could change not just military aviation, but human understanding of flight itself. And so the skies above Area 51 remain both a known quantity and a complete mystery. We know the boundaries, the restrictions, the official warnings. We can see the empty air and clear blue horizon. But we can only guess at what moves through that carefully guarded space when darkness falls and the desert grows still. In the coming chapters, we'll explore the witnesses who've claimed to see impossible things in those protected skies. Objects that move without sound, craft that defy physics, and lights that dance across the horizon in patterns no earthly aircraft could match. The skies that hide secrets have been keeping them for over 70 years. The question is whether those secrets are purely human or something far more extraordinary. Chapter 2. The Dawn Patrol, First Sightings. The year was 1953, when Sergeant First Class Michael Harrison first noticed something unusual on his radar screen. Harrison was a veteran operator, trained to read the electronic blips and traces that revealed every aircraft moving through the Nevada desert's airspace. He knew the signatures of bombers, fighters, and transport planes. He could distinguish between birds and debris, weather patterns, and electronic interference. But the object he tracked that autumn morning matched nothing in his experience. It appeared suddenly at the edge of his scope, moving faster than any known aircraft of the era. The blip accelerated smoothly to what Harrison estimated as over 2,000 miles per hour, a speed that wouldn't be achieved by human-built craft for another decade. Then, without warning, it stopped. Not slowed, not decelerated gradually, as any physical object must. It simply ceased all forward motion, hovering motionless above the restricted zone for nearly 10 minutes before vanishing entirely from the screen. Harrison reported the anomaly through proper channels. His superiors reviewed the radar tapes, questioned his equipment calibration, and ultimately filed the incident under atmospheric interference. But Harrison knew what he had seen. And he wasn't alone. Similar reports began accumulating throughout the mid-1950s, just as Area 51 was establishing itself as America's premier testing ground for experimental aircraft. Radar operators at Nellis Air Force Base, Indian Springs, and other facilities in the region documented objects that seemed to ignore conventional flight physics. Items that made impossibly sharp turns, achieved fantastic speeds, or simply disappeared from electronic tracking without explanation. The timing wasn't coincidental. As the Central Intelligence Agency expanded operations at Groom Lake, testing the high-altitude U-2 spy plane under conditions of absolute secrecy, something else appeared to be sharing those protected skies. Controllers tracking the U-2's test flights occasionally noted secondary objects, unscheduled and unidentified, moving through the same airspace. Lieutenant Colonel James Mitchell, who oversaw air traffic control for the U-2 program from 1955 to 1959, later recalled several incidents where unknown aircraft seemed to parallel the spy plane during test flights. These objects maintained precise formation distances, matched the U-2's altitude changes, and demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything in the American or Soviet inventory. The most disturbing aspect wasn't their presence, but their behavior. These craft appeared to be observing, studying, perhaps even escorting the U-2 during its most sensitive test phases. Mitchell's reports, classified for decades, described objects that would accelerate alongside the spy plane, maintain visual contact for extended periods, then depart at speeds that violated known aerodynamic principles. The public, of course, knew nothing of the U-2 program during those years. The aircraft's existence remained one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Cold War. But they did begin noticing an unprecedented surge in unidentified flying object reports across the American Southwest. Sightings that clustered around military installations, particularly in Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico. Government investigators would later acknowledge that many UFO reports from the 1950s could be explained by classified aircraft testing. The U-2, with its unusual proportions and flight characteristics, was responsible for a significant percentage of high-altitude sightings. But that explanation, while convenient, didn't account for all the reports. Some described objects that moved in ways no earthly aircraft classified or otherwise, could achieve. Dr. Edward Thompson, a civilian radar specialist who worked on contract projects for the Air Force during this period, maintained detailed personal logs of unusual tracking events. His records, discovered decades later among his papers, document over 40 instances of objects exhibiting non-ballistic flight characteristics in the airspace around Area 51 between 1954 and 1962. Thompson's notes describe craft that could hover motionless at extreme altitudes, accelerate from 0 to supersonic speeds in seconds, and execute sharp directional changes that would generate G-forces fatal to any human pilot. Most significantly, these objects appeared on multiple radar systems simultaneously, eliminating the possibility of equipment malfunction or operator error. The secrecy surrounding Area 51 created an unintended consequence, the perfect cover story for genuinely unexplained phenomena. Any UFO sighting in the Nevada region could be dismissed as a classified military project. Witnesses were discouraged from speaking publicly about their experiences, not through threats or intimidation, but through the simple suggestion that they might have observed sensitive national defense activities. This official ambiguity served multiple purposes. It protected legitimate black projects from public scrutiny while providing plausible explanations for anomalous sightings. But it also meant that truly extraordinary encounters could be buried beneath layers of classification and misdirection. If alien craft were indeed sharing the skies above Groom Lake, their presence could be concealed indefinitely behind the shield of national security. By the early 1960s, as the A-12 Oxcart program began supersonic testing at Area 51, the pattern of unusual radar contacts had evolved. Controllers now reported formations of unknown objects, sometimes 3 or 4 craft moving in precise coordination. These formations would appear during A-12 test flights, maintain visual observation of the experimental aircraft, then disperse at incredible speeds. Captain Robert Sterling, who served as lead controller for A-12 operations from 1962 to 1966, described the phenomenon as systematic surveillance. The unknown craft, he believed, were conducting their own intelligence-gathering operation, studying American aerospace developments with the same methodical approach used by human intelligence agencies. The implications were staggering. If Sterling's assessment was correct, then Earth's most advanced aircraft were being observed and analyzed by something possessing even more advanced technology. The watchers were being watched, and the observers possessed capabilities that human science couldn't explain or replicate. As dawn patrol operations continued throughout the 1960s, a disturbing pattern emerged. The unknown craft appeared most frequently during breakthrough test flights, moments when human aerospace technology achieved new levels of performance. It was as if these mysterious observers were particularly interested in human progress, monitoring each leap forward in speed, altitude, or stealth capability. The correlation between classified aircraft development and UFO activity created a perfect storm of secrecy and speculation. Every breakthrough at Area 51 generated new sightings, and every sighting was automatically classified alongside the legitimate projects it might have observed. Whether these early encounters represented misidentified human aircraft, foreign surveillance operations, or something far more extraordinary, they established a pattern that would persist for decades. The skies above Area 51 had become a convergence point, where human ambition reached toward the stars, and something from those stars seemed to be reaching back. Chapter 3: Triangular Shadows in the Night. The 1980s brought a new shape to the desert sky. Where previous decades had seen disks and cylinders, witnesses now described something entirely different: vast triangular objects that moved with deliberate, almost stately grace across the Nevada horizon. These weren't the darting, erratic movements of earlier sightings. These craft, if craft they were, possessed a presence that commanded attention through sheer size and impossible silence. The first documented report came from a rancher named William Patterson, whose property bordered the outer edges of the Nellis complex. On a clear October night in 1981, Patterson was checking livestock when he noticed what he initially thought was a low-flying cargo plane approaching from the north. But as the object drew closer, its outline resolved into something that defied conventional aircraft design. The craft was triangular. Patterson estimated its wingspan at over 200 feet, larger than any fighter jet he'd ever seen. Its edges were sharp and precise, creating a perfect geometric shape against the star field. Most remarkably, it made no sound whatsoever. No engine noise, no wind disturbance, not even the whisper of air moving over surfaces. It drifted overhead at perhaps 100 feet altitude, close enough that Patterson could make out surface details in the moonlight. The hull appeared to be dark, almost black, with a texture that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Along its edges ran what Patterson described as a faint, luminous outline, not bright enough to illuminate the ground below, but visible against the night sky, like a constellation that had broken free from its fixed position among the stars. Within months, similar reports began accumulating from across the region. Truckers driving the lonely highways around Area 51 described triangular shadows passing silently overhead. Amateur astronomers reported geometric objects blotting out portions of the Milky Way as they moved across the desert. Ranch hands and security personnel from various installations in the area all contributed pieces to what was becoming a consistent pattern. The triangular craft appeared most frequently during the early morning hours between 2 and 4 a.m., when air traffic was minimal and ground observers were few. They moved slowly, rarely exceeding what witnesses estimated as 50 or 60 miles per hour. Their flight paths were direct and purposeful, often following the major highway routes that connected military installations throughout southern Nevada. Most significantly, these objects displayed flight characteristics that seemed to ignore fundamental principles of aerodynamics. Conventional aircraft, particularly large ones, require substantial airspeed to generate lift. Yet these triangular craft could hover motionless, accelerate from a standing start without any visible propulsion system, and turn with a precision that suggested some form of flight control unknown to human aerospace engineering. Dr. Marcus Webb, a former aerospace engineer who had worked on classified projects at Edwards Air Force Base during the 1970s, became fascinated by these reports. He began conducting his own observations from legal vantage points around the restricted zone, using military surplus night vision equipment and telephoto cameras. Over the course of 3 years, from 1983 to 1986, Webb documented 17 separate encounters with triangular objects. His notes describe craft that appeared to be under intelligent control, following flight patterns that suggested reconnaissance or surveillance missions. The objects would appear from behind mountain ridges, conduct slow, methodical sweeps of specific areas, then depart at speeds that his calculations suggested were impossible for any known aircraft of that size. Webb's engineering background allowed him to analyze what he was seeing with technical precision. The lack of any visible exhaust, contrails, or heat signature suggested propulsion systems that operated on principles entirely different from conventional jet or rocket engines. The object's ability to hover and maneuver at low speeds indicated some form of anti-gravity or field effect propulsion that human science had not yet achieved. But there was another explanation lurking in the classified world of aerospace development. During the early 1980s, Lockheed's Skunk Works division was conducting highly secret tests of a revolutionary new aircraft at Area 51. The F-117 Nighthawk, the world's first operational stealth fighter, bore a distinctly angular, geometric design unlike any previous military aircraft. The F-117's faceted surfaces and sharp edges were specifically engineered to deflect radar waves, making it nearly invisible to electronic detection systems. From certain angles, particularly from below, the aircraft's outline could appear triangular. Its stealth coating absorbed light and radar energy, giving it the same light-absorbing properties that witnesses had described. Moreover, the F-117 was tested exclusively at night to maintain security. Its flight patterns around Area 51 would have taken it directly over many of the locations where triangular craft were being reported. The timing of the sightings, from the early 1980s onward, corresponded perfectly with the Nighthawk's test program. Yet, even accounting for the F-117, significant anomalies remained. The stealth fighter was a relatively small aircraft with a wingspan of just over 40 feet. Witnesses consistently described objects several times larger. The F-117 was also limited by conventional aerodynamics, incapable of the hovering and low-speed maneuvering that characterized many triangular craft sightings. Some researchers proposed that what witnesses were seeing represented multiple aircraft, F-117 tests, coinciding with sightings of genuinely unknown objects. The stealth fighter's presence provided perfect cover for testing even more exotic technology, whether of human or non-human origin. This theory gained credibility when classified documents, released decades later, revealed that Area 51 had been used to test more than just the F-117 during the 1980s. Various experimental aircraft, including unmanned vehicles and advanced reconnaissance platforms, had shared the same airspace. Some of these projects remained classified even into the 21st century. The triangular craft sightings continued throughout the decade, with reports spreading beyond Nevada to include Arizona, Colorado, and other western states. The objects seemed to follow patterns that suggested systematic surveillance of military installations, nuclear facilities, and aerospace development centers. If these were human aircraft, they represented technology decades ahead of anything in the public domain. If they were something else entirely, they demonstrated an intelligence actively monitoring human military and technological progress. By the late 1980s, the triangular craft had become a fixture in UFO literature, described in dozens of books and documentaries. But the witnesses who had actually seen them maintained a consistent story: massive, silent objects that moved with purpose and precision through some of America's most restricted airspace. Whether these triangular shadows represented the cutting edge of human aerospace technology or something far more mysterious, they had established a new category in the ongoing enigma of Area 51. The skies that had once hidden experimental spy planes now concealed shapes that challenged every assumption about flight, physics, and the very nature of the objects that shared our planet's atmosphere. The triangle had become a symbol, representing the precise intersection where human innovation ended and the truly unknown began. Chapter 4: The Aurora Project and Hypersonic Mysteries. In the pre-dawn darkness of March 15th, 1989, something extraordinary shattered the silence above the Mojave Desert. Air traffic controllers at Edwards Air Force Base detected an object moving at impossible speed across their radar screens. The signature was unlike anything they had seen before, a craft traveling at over Mach 6, 6 times the speed of sound, at an altitude of 80,000 feet. The object left behind a contrail unlike any conventional aircraft had ever produced. Instead of the familiar white vapor trail of a jet engine, witnesses described a segmented pattern, almost like a string of pearls stretched across the sky. The contrail persisted for over an hour, clearly visible from hundreds of miles away, before finally dispersing in the high-altitude winds. Within hours, the sighting had reached the attention of aerospace journalists and UFO researchers. But this wasn't just another unexplained aerial phenomenon. According to leaked budget documents that had surfaced months earlier, the United States Air Force had been developing something called Aurora, a hypersonic reconnaissance aircraft designed to replace the aging SR-71 Blackbird. Aurora, if it existed, represented the next evolutionary step in spy plane technology. While the Blackbird could reach Mach 3.3, Aurora was rumored to achieve speeds approaching Mach 8 or higher. Such velocities would allow the aircraft to cross entire continents in minutes, photographing targets and escaping before enemy air defenses could respond. The acoustic signature of these high-speed flights was as distinctive as their visual appearance. Witnesses across California, Nevada, and Arizona reported hearing what they described as sky quakes or atmospheric thunder. These sounds were different from typical sonic booms, lasting longer and producing a rolling, rumbling effect that seemed to shake the very air itself. Dr. Stephen Richardson, a seismologist at the California Institute of Technology, became fascinated by these acoustic anomalies. His instruments detected ground vibrations consistent with aircraft generating multiple shock waves, a phenomenon that occurred only at extremely high speeds. The pattern suggested an aircraft using some form of pulse detonation propulsion, a technology that existed only in theoretical research papers. Richardson's analysis indicated that whatever was creating these sounds was traveling at speeds that exceeded the performance envelope of any publicly acknowledged aircraft. The shock wave patterns suggested velocities in the Mach 6 to Mach 10 range, fast enough to reach any point on Earth within 2 hours of takeoff. But the Aurora program, despite persistent rumors and alleged budget line items, was never officially acknowledged. The Air Force denied its existence, stating that no hypersonic aircraft was in active development. Skeptics pointed out that such denials were standard procedure for classified programs. The U-2 and SR-71 had been similarly dismissed before their eventual disclosure. However, the sightings continued throughout the 1990s, and the reports began to include details that stretched beyond conventional aerospace engineering. Witnesses described objects that could not only achieve hypersonic speeds, but could also perform maneuvers that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Captain Thomas Mitchell, a commercial airline pilot with over 20 years of experience, encountered one of these objects while flying a red-eye flight from Los Angeles to Denver in 1992. At 37,000 feet, Mitchell observed what appeared to be a conventional aircraft contrail forming ahead of his position. But as he watched, the contrail began exhibiting behavior unlike anything in his experience. The vapor trail curved in a perfect 90-degree angle, maintaining its width and consistency throughout the turn. No known aircraft could execute such a maneuver at high altitude without losing speed or altitude. More remarkably, the contrail then began moving vertically, climbing straight up until it disappeared into the stratosphere. Mitchell's co-pilot confirmed the sighting, and their aircraft's radar briefly detected an object matching the contrail's position. The radar signature indicated something approximately 150 feet in length, moving at speeds that fluctuated between subsonic and hypersonic within seconds. Similar reports accumulated from military personnel stationed at bases throughout the Southwest. Radar operators described objects that could accelerate from stationary positions to several times the speed of sound, almost instantaneously. The acceleration profiles were unlike anything achieved by conventional propulsion systems, which require time to build thrust and overcome inertia. The most puzzling aspect of these encounters was the apparent disregard for atmospheric heating. At hypersonic speeds, friction with air molecules generates temperatures exceeding 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. Yet witnesses described objects that showed no visible signs of thermal stress, no glowing surfaces, no heat distortion effects that would indicate extreme temperatures. This contradiction led some researchers to propose that aurora, if it existed, might incorporate technology that transcended conventional aerospace engineering. Perhaps the legendary spy plane was not entirely a human creation, but rather a hybrid vehicle combining recovered alien propulsion systems with terrestrial engineering. The theory gained credibility when former Lockheed Skunk Works engineer Ben Rich made cryptic statements about the company's classified programs. Rich, who had overseen development of the F-117 stealth fighter, hinted that Lockheed possessed technologies that the public wouldn't see for decades. He spoke of propulsion systems that manipulated electromagnetic fields and materials that could withstand temperatures that would destroy conventional aircraft. Rich's comments, made during public speaking engagements in the 1990s, suggested that breakthrough technologies were being tested at facilities like Area 51. Whether these advances came from human research or from studying recovered alien craft remained deliberately ambiguous. The pulse detonation engine theory provided one possible explanation for aurora's performance characteristics. This experimental propulsion system created thrust through controlled explosions rather than continuous combustion like conventional jet engines. Theoretical studies suggested that pulse detonation engines could achieve much higher speeds and efficiency than traditional designs. However, even pulse detonation technology couldn't explain all the reported capabilities. The instantaneous acceleration, the ability to hover and then immediately reach hypersonic speeds, the apparent immunity to atmospheric heating, these characteristics suggested propulsion principles that human science had not yet discovered or publicly acknowledged. Satellite reconnaissance added another layer to the mystery. Commercial imaging satellites occasionally captured what appeared to be contrails with the characteristic segmented pattern associated with aurora flights. These images showed vapor trails originating from or terminating at Area 51, suggesting that whatever was creating them was based at the Nevada facility. The contrail patterns themselves became a subject of intensive analysis. Unlike the smooth, continuous trails left by conventional aircraft, these formations displayed a pulsed or beaded structure. Computer modeling suggested that such patterns could result from engines that operated in cycles, creating thrust in discrete bursts rather than continuous streams. By the late 1990s, the aurora phenomenon had evolved beyond simple aircraft sightings into something more complex and mysterious. The combination of impossible speeds, unconventional contrails, and physics-defying maneuvers suggested that whatever was flying in the skies above Area 51 represented a quantum leap in aerospace technology. Whether aurora was a purely human achievement, the result of breakthrough research conducted in underground laboratories, or something more extraordinary involving technology not of this world, it had become another piece of the enduring puzzle surrounding America's most secretive airspace. The hypersonic mysteries continued to challenge every assumption about the limits of flight, speed, and the very nature of what was possible in Earth's atmosphere. Chapter 5: Disc-shaped objects over the desert. While triangular craft and hypersonic vehicles captured headlines throughout the 1980s and 90s, another type of object continued to appear with remarkable consistency in the skies around Area 51. These were the classic flying saucers, metallic discs that seemed to embody humanity's oldest conception of how visitors from other worlds might travel through our atmosphere. The persistence of disc-shaped sightings was particularly intriguing given the evolution of aerospace technology. As human aircraft became increasingly angular and geometric, designed for stealth and efficiency, the reported alien craft maintained their smooth, curved profiles. It was as if two entirely different approaches to flight were sharing the same airspace, one following human engineering principles, the other operating according to rules we hadn't yet discovered. Margaret Thompson had been photographing wildlife in the Nevada desert for over 30 years when she encountered her first disc-shaped craft in the spring of 1997. She was positioned on a ridge overlooking the southern approach to Area 51, using a telephoto lens to capture images of desert bighorn sheep, when something unusual entered her viewfinder. At first, Thompson thought she was looking at a weather balloon or research aircraft. The object was circular, approximately 50 feet in diameter, with a polished metallic surface that reflected the afternoon sunlight like a mirror. But as she watched through her camera lens, the object began exhibiting behavior unlike any conventional aircraft or balloon. The disc rotated slowly around its vertical axis while maintaining perfect stability in the air. There was no visible propulsion system, no exhaust, no disturbance of the air around it. Most remarkably, despite its size and apparent mass, the object made no sound whatsoever. Thompson, who lived beneath commercial flight paths and was familiar with aircraft noise, found the complete silence unsettling. After hovering motionless for nearly 10 minutes, the disc began moving horizontally across the desert floor. Its speed was moderate at first, perhaps 30 or 40 miles per hour, but perfectly smooth. No acceleration period, no gradual build-up of velocity. It simply transitioned from stationary to moving as if the concept of inertia didn't apply. Thompson managed to capture several photographs before the object suddenly accelerated to extraordinary speed. In less than 3 seconds, the disc went from a leisurely cruise to what she estimated was several hundred miles per hour. The acceleration was instantaneous and silent, leaving no contrail or heat distortion. The object streaked toward the mountains east of Groom Lake and disappeared from view. Her photographs, when analyzed by imaging experts, showed an object with characteristics that defied conventional explanation. The metallic surface displayed no seams, rivets, or panel lines that would indicate conventional construction. The disc appeared to be manufactured from a single piece of material, formed into a perfect geometric shape with no visible means of propulsion or control. Similar disk sightings had been reported around Area 51 since the facility's earliest days. Unlike the triangular craft that emerged in the 1980s or the hypersonic vehicles of the 90s, disc-shaped objects represented a constant presence that spanned decades of technological change. Dr. Rachel Martinez, a metallurgist who studied UFO photographs as a hobby, became fascinated by the consistency of these disc reports. In her analysis of over 200 photographs and witness descriptions from 1950 to 2000, she found remarkable uniformity in the object's appearance and behavior. The discs were almost invariably described as metallic, with surfaces that appeared to be either brushed aluminum or a similar reflective material. They ranged in size from 20 feet to over 100 feet in diameter, but maintained consistent proportional relationships. The larger discs were typically observed at greater distances, while smaller ones were seen during closer encounters. Most significantly, the discs displayed flight characteristics that remained constant across 5 decades of sightings. They could hover motionless for extended periods, rotate around their central axis, and accelerate to extreme speeds without any transitional period. These capabilities suggested propulsion systems that operated on principles entirely different from conventional aerospace technology. The timing of disc sightings around Area 51 showed interesting patterns. Many occurred during daylight hours, when the metallic surfaces would be most visible against the desert sky. Unlike the triangular craft that preferred darkness or the hypersonic vehicles that created contrails at extreme altitude, the discs seemed almost deliberately conspicuous. Some researchers theorized that the daytime sightings represented a form of communication or demonstration. If the discs were piloted by intelligence from other worlds, their visibility might be intentional, a way of announcing their presence to human observers while remaining within the protected airspace where they couldn't be intercepted. The correlation between disc sightings and activity at Area 51 suggested a relationship that went beyond mere coincidence. Former base personnel, speaking anonymously, described occasions when disc-shaped objects appeared during critical test phases of human aircraft development. The discs would maintain observation positions at safe distances, apparently monitoring human technological progress. One particularly detailed account came from a radar technician who worked at a facility adjacent to Area 51 during the 1970s. He described tracking multiple disc-shaped objects that would appear simultaneously with scheduled test flights of experimental aircraft. The discs maintained precise formation spacing and altitudes that suggested intelligent control and coordination. The radar signatures of these objects were unlike anything in the technician's experience. Conventional aircraft produce radar returns that fluctuate based on their orientation and movement. The disc-shaped objects maintained steady, consistent signatures regardless of their apparent rotation or movement patterns. Their radar profiles suggested perfectly spherical or disc-like shapes with uniform density and composition. Physical evidence of disc encounters remained elusive, but there were occasional traces that hinted at their reality. Witnesses reported finding circular depressions in desert sand at locations where discs had been observed hovering close to the ground. These impressions were typically 20 to 30 feet in diameter, with compressed sand patterns that suggested downward pressure from an object of substantial mass. Electromagnetic effects were another consistent element in disc sightings around Area 51. Witnesses frequently reported interference with electronic equipment during close encounters. Vehicle engines would stall, radio communications would be disrupted, and compass needles would spin wildly. These effects suggested that the disks generated powerful electromagnetic fields as part of their propulsion or control systems. The materials science implications of disk construction puzzled aerospace engineers who studied the reports. The seamless, single-piece construction implied manufacturing techniques far beyond current human capabilities. Creating a 50-foot diameter disk from a single piece of metal would require industrial processes that didn't exist in any known facility. Alternative explanations for disk sightings included experimental aircraft using unconventional designs, atmospheric phenomena, or misidentified conventional objects. However, the consistency of witness reports across multiple decades and the object's apparent interaction with classified test activities suggested something more substantial than misperception or natural phenomena. The disc-shaped craft represented perhaps the most enduring mystery in the Area 51 enigma. While triangular craft could be explained as stealth technology and hypersonic vehicles as advanced propulsion research, the discs maintained characteristics that seemed to transcend current human engineering capabilities. Their presence in the skies above America's most classified aerospace facility raised profound questions about the relationship between human technological development and potential extraterrestrial observation. Whether the discs represented recovered alien technology being test-flown by human pilots, or visiting craft monitoring human progress from their original operators, they embodied the central mystery that continued to surround Area 51. In the shifting desert light, where heat mirages blurred the line between reality and illusion, the metallic discs remained a constant presence, silent witnesses to humanity's reach toward the stars, and perhaps guardians of secrets that extended far beyond our understanding. Chapter 6: The Night Shift, when Area 51 comes alive. When the sun disappears behind the mountains west of Groom Lake, Area 51 transforms. The daytime stillness gives way to subtle movements, distant lights, and the quiet hum of activity that suggests the base's most sensitive work begins only after darkness falls. For those who watch from the surrounding ridges, the night shift represents the most compelling hours in the ongoing mystery of America's most classified facility. The pattern was first documented by UFO researchers in the 1970s, who noticed that unusual aerial activity around Area 51 peaked during specific nighttime hours. Between midnight and 4 a.m., when commercial air traffic was minimal and satellite coverage was reduced, the protected airspace above Groom Lake would come alive with movements that defied easy explanation. Security patrols increased dramatically after sunset. The unmarked white trucks that monitored the perimeter during daylight hours were joined by additional vehicles equipped with night vision equipment and communications arrays. Observers positioned on legal vantage points reported seeing convoys of military trucks moving along roads that disappeared into restricted territory, their headlights creating streams of light across the dark desert floor. The timing wasn't random. Former military personnel familiar with classified operations explained that darkness provided multiple advantages for sensitive testing. Night flights were invisible to most civilian observers, satellite surveillance schedules could be predicted and avoided, and atmospheric conditions in the desert were often optimal for both conventional and unconventional aircraft testing. David Chen, a night shift security guard at a facility adjacent to the Nellis complex, worked the midnight to 8 a.m. shift for over 15 years. His position gave him an unobstructed view across several miles of desert toward the restricted zone around Groom Lake. During his tenure, from 1983 to 1998, Chen documented patterns of activity that corresponded directly with the most compelling UFO sightings in the area. Chen's logs, kept as a personal hobby rather than official duty, recorded increased ground vehicle movement in the hours preceding unusual aerial activity. Military convoys would move through the desert in precise formations, following routes that led toward areas where strange lights would later appear in the sky. The convoys consisted of specialized vehicles, flatbed trucks carrying covered loads, fuel tankers, and mobile communication units. The loads on the flatbed trucks were always concealed beneath heavy tarps, but Chen noted that their shapes and proportions didn't match any conventional military equipment he recognized. Some cargo was disc-shaped, others triangular, and a few displayed irregular contours that suggested complex, multifaceted objects. The vehicles carrying these loads moved with extreme caution, traveling at speeds well below normal convoy pace. Most significantly, Chen observed that the unusual aerial activity would begin approximately 2 to 3 hours after these convoys reached their destinations within the restricted zone. The correlation was so consistent that Chen could predict when strange lights would appear by monitoring ground vehicle movements earlier in the evening. The lights themselves followed patterns that suggested careful orchestration rather than random testing. They would appear at specific locations, maintain positions for predetermined periods, then move in coordinated sequences that resembled choreographed performances more than aircraft tests. Multiple objects would rise simultaneously from different points within the base, execute synchronized maneuvers, then descend and disappear. Temperature inversions in the desert atmosphere created ideal conditions for these night operations. The clear, dry air provided excellent visibility, while the thermal layers that formed after sunset could help conceal aircraft from certain types of detection systems. Infrared sensors and heat-seeking equipment would be less effective during periods when ground temperatures dropped rapidly while upper atmosphere layers remained warm. Sarah Mitchell, a civilian astronomer who studied the night sky from a position north of the restricted zone, documented over 200 instances of unusual aerial phenomena between 1985 and 2005. Her observations, recorded with precise timing and celestial coordinates, revealed that most extraordinary sightings occurred during specific lunar phases and atmospheric conditions. Mitchell's data showed that activity peaked during new moon periods, when natural darkness was maximized. Clear, stable atmospheric conditions were also preferred, suggesting that whatever was being tested required optimal visibility and minimal air turbulence. The most spectacular displays occurred during winter months, when longer nights provided extended operational windows. The objects Mitchell observed during these night shift periods displayed capabilities that exceeded anything in the acknowledged military inventory. Lights would appear and disappear instantaneously, without the gradual brightening or dimming that characterized conventional aircraft. Multiple objects would maintain perfect formation spacing while executing complex maneuvers that would require extraordinary coordination between pilots or sophisticated automated control systems. Electronic surveillance equipment operated by UFO researchers detected unusual radio and radar emissions during peak activity periods. The signals were encrypted and transmitted on frequencies that didn't correspond to known military or civilian allocations. Signal analysis suggested digital data streams that might represent telemetry from unmanned vehicles or communication between multiple aircraft operating in coordinated groups. The night shift phenomenon wasn't limited to aerial activity. Ground-based observers reported seeing lights moving along the desert floor within the restricted zone, sometimes in single-file formations that suggested vehicle convoys, other times in patterns that resembled search operations or equipment positioning activities. These ground lights would appear and disappear at specific locations, as if vehicles were entering and exiting concealed facilities. Acoustic monitoring revealed that the night shift operations produced minimal sound signatures. Unlike conventional military exercises, which generated substantial noise from jet engines, helicopter rotors, and ground vehicle operations, the Area 51 night activities were remarkably quiet. When sounds were detected, they consisted of low-frequency hums or vibrations that didn't match any known aircraft propulsion systems. The careful timing of night shift operations suggested awareness of external monitoring. Activity would cease abruptly during periods when commercial or military aircraft approached the restricted airspace, resuming only after the zone was clear of potential observers. This operational security indicated that whatever was being tested required absolute isolation from unauthorized detection. Weather patterns also influenced night shift scheduling. Operations were suspended during storms, high wind conditions, or periods of atmospheric instability. This suggested that the test subjects were either highly sensitive to environmental conditions or required precise control that could be compromised by turbulence or precipitation. Former base personnel, speaking anonymously years after their service, confirmed that Area 51 maintained completely separate operational schedules for different types of testing. Conventional aircraft and weapons systems were tested during normal duty hours, while the most sensitive programs were restricted to carefully selected night shift periods when security could be maximized and external observation minimized. The night shift represented more than just operational preference. It embodied the fundamental secrecy that surrounded Area 51's most extraordinary activities. In the darkness of the Nevada desert, protected by layers of restricted airspace and electronic surveillance, the base conducted operations that pushed beyond the boundaries of acknowledged human technology. Whether those operations involved testing recovered extraterrestrial craft, developing revolutionary propulsion systems, or exploring the intersection between human innovation and alien science, the night shift hours remained the window through which the outside world caught fleeting glimpses of possibilities that challenged every assumption about flight, physics, and the limits of what was achievable in Earth's atmosphere. As dawn approached and the desert began to warm, the extraordinary would fade back into secrecy, leaving only questions and the promise that when darkness returned, the skies above Area 51 would once again reveal their hidden mysteries. Chapter 7: Impossible Maneuvers in Controlled Airspace. In the world of aviation, physics imposes absolute limits. Aircraft must obey the laws of inertia, momentum, and structural integrity. Pilots must survive the crushing forces of acceleration and deceleration. These constraints have shaped every aircraft ever built, from the Wright brothers' first flight to the most advanced military jets. Yet, in the skies above Area 51, witnesses have consistently reported objects that seem to operate outside these fundamental rules. The maneuvers described by observers challenge every principle of aerodynamics. Objects traveling at high speed, executing instantaneous 90-degree turns, craft stopping abruptly from supersonic velocity with no deceleration period, vehicles hovering motionless at impossible altitudes, then accelerating to extreme speeds in the span of seconds. If accurate, these reports suggest propulsion and control systems that transcend current human understanding. Captain Robert Hayes encountered such impossible physics firsthand during a routine training flight in 1994. Hayes, a veteran pilot with over 4,000 hours of flight time in military aircraft, was conducting navigation exercises in airspace adjacent to the restricted zone when he observed something that violated every principle of flight he had learned. An object appeared on his radar scope, approaching from the direction of Groom Lake at approximately Mach 2. Hayes visually acquired the target, expecting to see a conventional military aircraft on a test mission. Instead, he observed a metallic disc-shaped object that suddenly executed a perfect right-angle turn without any change in speed or altitude. The physics of such a maneuver are theoretically impossible. At Mach 2, an object would need to withstand g-forces exceeding 200 times Earth's gravity to make an instantaneous directional change. No known material could survive such stress, and any human pilot would be instantly killed by the acceleration forces. Yet Hayes watched the object complete the turn and continue at the same velocity in a perpendicular direction. Hayes immediately contacted air traffic control to report the sighting. The controller confirmed that an unidentified object was visible on radar, but provided no additional information. Within minutes, Hayes received instructions to alter his flight path and avoid the restricted zone. The official incident report filed later made no mention of the impossible maneuver he had witnessed. Similar accounts have accumulated from both military and civilian pilots over several decades. The consistency of these reports is particularly striking given the varied backgrounds and experience levels of the witnesses. Commercial airline pilots, military aviators, and private aircraft operators have all described encounters with objects performing maneuvers that defy known physics. Dr. Patricia Williams, a former NASA engineer who specialized in flight dynamics, became fascinated by these pilot testimonies after her retirement in 2002. Williams analyzed over 50 detailed reports of impossible maneuvers, applying rigorous engineering principles to assess their plausibility. Her conclusions were disturbing. If the witnessed events were accurate, they represented technology that operated according to principles unknown to current science. Williams's analysis focused on the G-force implications of the reported maneuvers. Human pilots can survive brief exposure to forces up to 9 times Earth's gravity with proper equipment and training. Beyond that threshold, unconsciousness occurs within seconds, followed rapidly by death. The instantaneous directional changes described by witnesses would generate G-forces hundreds of times greater than human survival limits. Even unmanned vehicles face structural limitations that would prevent such maneuvers. The strongest materials available to aerospace engineers would fracture under the stress of instantaneous acceleration changes at high velocity. The fact that witnesses described objects maintaining structural integrity during impossible maneuvers suggested either revolutionary materials science or propulsion systems that somehow negated inertial forces. The hovering capabilities reported around Area 51 presented another physics puzzle. Conventional aircraft require forward motion to generate lift through airflow over wing surfaces. Helicopters and vertical takeoff aircraft use rotating blades or vectored thrust to overcome gravity. Yet witnesses consistently described objects hovering silently with no visible means of lift generation. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, who served as a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base during the 1980s, encountered one of these hovering objects during a classified mission that took him near the restricted zone around Groom Lake. Morrison observed a disc-shaped craft maintaining position at 15,000 feet altitude with no apparent propulsion system. The object remained motionless for over 10 minutes, showing no signs of the constant adjustments required for conventional aircraft to maintain stable hovering flight. When Morrison attempted to approach for closer observation, the craft accelerated vertically at impossible speed, disappearing from sight in less than 5 seconds. Morrison's engineering background allowed him to analyze what he had witnessed from a technical perspective. The vertical acceleration he observed would have required thrust-to-weight ratios far exceeding any known propulsion system. Chemical rockets, the most powerful conventional engines available, could not produce the instantaneous acceleration he had witnessed. Radar operators at military installations throughout the Southwest have documented these impossible maneuvers on their tracking systems. Unlike visual sightings, which could potentially be explained by optical illusions or misidentification, radar signatures provide objective measurement of object movement and acceleration. Technical Sergeant Maria Rodriguez operated radar systems at a classified facility adjacent to the Nellis complex for 12 years. During her service from 1987 to 1999, Rodriguez tracked numerous objects, displaying flight characteristics that violated known physics. Her equipment recorded objects accelerating from 0 to several times the speed of sound in less than 2 seconds. The radar signatures showed perfectly smooth acceleration curves, with no transition period between stationary and hypersonic velocity. Conventional aircraft produce distinctive acceleration profiles that reflect the time required to build thrust and overcome inertia. The objects Rodriguez tracked appeared to ignore these fundamental principles entirely. Perhaps most remarkably, some radar tracks showed objects stopping instantaneously from extreme velocity with no deceleration period. The electronic signatures indicated craft traveling at over Mach 5 that suddenly became stationary, with no transition phase between hypersonic flight and complete stillness. These radar observations were corroborated by visual witnesses who described the same impossible maneuvers. Objects would streak across the sky at tremendous speed, then halt abruptly without any visible deceleration effects. No sonic boom, no heat trail, no atmospheric disturbance marked these transitions between motion and stillness. The electromagnetic implications of such maneuvers raised additional questions. Rapid acceleration and deceleration of metallic objects should generate distinctive electromagnetic signatures detectable by sensitive equipment. Yet, the craft observed around Area 51 seemed to move without producing the expected electromagnetic effects, suggesting propulsion systems that operated through unknown principles. Some theoretical physicists have proposed that the observed maneuvers might be achievable through manipulation of gravitational fields or space-time geometry. In such scenarios, the craft wouldn't experience traditional inertial forces because they would be moving through artificially curved space rather than accelerating through normal three-dimensional geometry. These theories remain highly speculative and beyond current human technology. However, they provide a theoretical framework that could potentially explain how objects might perform impossible maneuvers without violating physics, but rather by operating according to more advanced understanding of physical laws. The witnesses to these impossible maneuvers share common characteristics: extensive aviation experience, technical training, and familiarity with conventional aircraft performance. Their accounts cannot be easily dismissed as misidentification or inexperience. When experienced pilots and radar operators independently report the same types of physics-defying behavior, the implications become difficult to ignore. Whether these impossible maneuvers represent revolutionary advances in human technology, recovered alien propulsion systems, or active demonstrations by extraterrestrial visitors, they suggest that the controlled airspace above Area 51 serves as a testing ground for capabilities that transcend current scientific understanding. In the carefully monitored skies, where every conventional aircraft must obey the rigid laws of physics, something else moves with absolute freedom, unbound by the constraints that limit human flight, and challenging every assumption about what is possible in Earth's atmosphere. Chapter 8. The Watchers on the Ridge. 26 miles from the main gate of Area 51, a narrow dirt road winds up the slopes of Tikaboo Peak. The journey requires four-wheel drive, determination, and enough water to survive the desert heat. At the summit, nearly 8,000 feet above sea level, a small community of dedicated observers has maintained an informal vigil for over 3 decades. They are the Watchers on the Ridge, civilians who have turned UFO research into a precise science. These aren't casual tourists hoping for a glimpse of flying saucers. The regular observers who make the grueling trek to Tikaboo Peak and other legal vantage points represent a sophisticated network of researchers, former military personnel, aerospace engineers, and retired scientists. They bring military surplus optics, digital cameras with telephoto lenses capable of resolving objects at distances exceeding 20 miles, and electronic equipment that can detect radio transmissions and electromagnetic anomalies. Glenn Campbell established the first organized observation post on Tikaboo Peak in 1993. Campbell, who had moved to Nevada specifically to study Area 51, recognized that systematic, long-term observation could yield data patterns that casual sightings never revealed. He began documenting flight schedules, weather correlations, and the relationship between ground activity and aerial phenomena. Campbell's methodology transformed UFO watching from passive observation into active research. He established protocols for recording sightings, standardized measurement techniques for estimating object size and speed, and created communication networks that allowed multiple observers to coordinate their efforts. Within 2 years, the Tikaboo Peak observation post had documented over 100 instances of unusual aerial activity. The equipment employed by serious watchers' rivals that used by professional astronomical observatories. High-end telescopes with computerized tracking systems can follow objects across the sky while maintaining perfect focus. Digital cameras equipped with image stabilization and extreme telephoto lenses capture details invisible to the naked eye. Night vision equipment, originally developed for military applications, reveals activity that occurs in complete darkness. Radio scanners monitor military frequencies, allowing observers to correlate aerial sightings with ground communications. Spectrum analyzers detect electromagnetic emissions that might indicate exotic propulsion systems. GPS units provide precise coordinates for sighting locations, enabling researchers to triangulate object positions and calculate accurate size estimates. The most dedicated watchers maintain detailed logs that would impress any scientist. Temperature, humidity, wind speed, atmospheric pressure, and visibility conditions are recorded for every observation session. Celestial coordinates mark the exact positions where objects appear and disappear. Timestamps accurate to the second document the duration of sightings and the intervals between multiple object appearances. Dr. Stephen Pearce, a retired electronics engineer, has made over 200 trips to various observation points around Area 51 since 1996. Pearce's engineering background allowed him to design custom detection equipment specifically optimized for documenting unusual aerial phenomena. His instruments can measure the electromagnetic signatures of objects at distances exceeding 15 miles. Pearce's most compelling sighting occurred during a clear November night in 2001. Using thermal imaging equipment, he detected 3 objects rising vertically from positions within the restricted zone. The thermal signatures indicated craft approximately 60 feet in diameter, maintaining perfect triangular formation as they climbed to an estimated altitude of 40,000 feet. The objects remained stationary for 18 minutes, during which Pearce's instruments recorded unusual electromagnetic emissions unlike any conventional aircraft signatures in his database. The craft then separated, with 2 accelerating toward the northwest at speeds his calculations suggested exceeded Mach 4. The third object descended rapidly back toward its original position and disappeared from thermal imaging. Pearce's documentation included precise timing, electromagnetic frequency analysis, and thermal profile measurements. The data suggested objects with propulsion systems that generated heat signatures different from any known jet or rocket engines. The electromagnetic emissions indicated power sources operating on principles that didn't match conventional aerospace technology. The cat-and-mouse relationship between observers and base security adds another dimension to the watching experience. Security personnel, known locally as camo dudes for their desert camouflage uniforms and unmarked white vehicles, monitor the legal observation points continuously. They position themselves on nearby ridges, using their own high-powered optics to watch the watchers. The security presence isn't necessarily hostile, but it's persistent and unmistakable. Observers report seeing the same unmarked vehicles and personnel day after day, positioned to maintain visual contact with civilian observation posts. Radio intercepts suggest that security teams receive real-time updates on observer activities and coordinate responses to any unusual civilian behavior. When significant aerial activity occurs over Area 51, the interaction between watchers and security becomes more complex. Observers report that security personnel often arrive at vantage points before unusual objects appear in the sky, suggesting either remarkable coincidence or advanced knowledge of planned activities. During extraordinary sightings, additional security vehicles appear, sometimes creating informal perimeters around civilian observation areas. The most compelling encounters occur when security responses seem to acknowledge that something genuinely unusual is happening. Former military personnel among the observer community note that standard security protocols wouldn't require the level of response they sometimes witness unless the aerial activity represented something beyond routine testing. Martha Rodriguez, a retired Air Force intelligence analyst, has observed from legal vantage points since 1998. Rodriguez's military background allows her to interpret security responses and ground activity patterns that civilian observers might miss. She describes occasions when base security seemed as surprised by aerial phenomena as the civilian watchers, suggesting that not all unusual activity is part of planned test programs. Rodriguez's most memorable encounter occurred during a joint observation session with 6 other experienced watchers in July 2004. A disc-shaped object appeared over the restricted zone, hovering at an estimated 20,000 feet altitude for over 30 minutes. The craft was visible through telescopes as a metallic disc with no apparent propulsion system or control surfaces. During the entire sighting, security vehicles maintained positions around the civilian observation area but made no attempt to interfere with the watching activities. Radio intercepts suggested that security personnel were reporting the incident to higher authorities, but received no instructions to disperse the civilian observers. Rodriguez interpreted this as evidence that the object was not part of any planned test program known to base security. The observer network has evolved into an informal intelligence gathering operation that shares information across multiple observation points. Digital communications allow real-time coordination between watchers positioned at different locations around the restricted zone. When unusual activity begins at one location, observers at other vantage points can be alerted to focus their attention and equipment on specific areas. This coordination has produced some of the most detailed documentation of aerial phenomena around Area 51. Multiple observers with different types of equipment can record the same events from various angles and distances, providing comprehensive data that would be impossible for individual watchers to obtain. The dedication required for serious observation work cannot be understated. Trips to remote vantage points require careful planning, substantial equipment, and willingness to spend long hours in harsh desert conditions with no guarantee of seeing anything unusual. Many observation sessions produce nothing more than conventional military aircraft and natural atmospheric phenomena. Yet for those who have witnessed the extraordinary, the experience validates years of patient watching. Objects that move without sound, craft that hover at impossible altitudes, and lights that perform maneuvers defying known physics provide glimpses into mysteries that continue to elude official explanation. The watchers on the ridge represent citizen science at its most dedicated. Armed with sophisticated equipment and systematic methodology, they maintain continuous surveillance of one of the most classified facilities in the world. Whether they are documenting advanced human technology or something far more extraordinary, their patient vigil continues to produce evidence that challenges conventional understanding of what flies in American airspace. From their elevated positions above the desert floor, the observers maintain their watch, knowing that the next clear night might bring revelations that reshape humanity's understanding of flight, physics, and our place in a universe that may be far more populated than we dare imagine. Chapter 9: Formation, Flying, Multiple Craft Encounters. Single objects performing impossible maneuvers are remarkable enough, but when multiple craft appear simultaneously, executing coordinated movements with military precision, the implications become far more profound. The skies above Area 51 have witnessed formations of unknown objects that suggest not merely advanced technology, but organized intelligence directing that technology towards specific objectives. The first documented formation encounter occurred on the night of September 23, 1978. Air traffic controller Michael Santos was monitoring the restricted airspace when his radar detected 5 objects rising simultaneously from different locations within the Groom Lake complex. The objects maintained perfect spacing as they climbed to 30,000 feet, forming a precise pentagon pattern that remained stable throughout a 40-minute observation period. Santos watched as the formation executed coordinated maneuvers that would challenge the most experienced aerial demonstration teams. The objects would expand their spacing in perfect proportion, contract into tighter formation, and rotate around a central point while maintaining their geometric arrangement. No radio communications were detected between the craft, suggesting either silent coordination protocols or control by a single intelligence managing all 5 objects. The Pentagon formation concluded its demonstration by dividing into 2 groups. 3 objects accelerated toward the northwest at speeds Santos estimated exceeded Mach 5, while the remaining 2 craft descended vertically back toward the restricted zone. The entire sequence lasted 47 minutes and was recorded on both primary and secondary radar systems. Formation sightings became increasingly common throughout the 1980s and 90s. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a former NASA flight dynamics engineer, documented over 30 instances of multiple craft encounters during her 12-year observation period from 1989 to 2001. Walsh's engineering background allowed her to analyze the coordination requirements for such formations with scientific precision. Walsh's analysis revealed that the formations displayed characteristics impossible for human-piloted aircraft. The spacing between objects remained constant to within inches during complex maneuvers that would require split-second timing and perfect coordination. Even the most advanced computer-controlled military aircraft couldn't maintain such precision during the types of maneuvers Walsh observed. The formations ranged from simple line configurations to complex geometric patterns. Triangle formations of 3 objects were most common, followed by diamond patterns with 4 craft and occasional larger groupings of 5 to 7 objects. The geometric arrangements weren't random, but followed mathematical relationships that suggested deliberate design rather than spontaneous coordination. Perhaps most remarkably, the formations could transform from one configuration to another while maintaining perfect positioning. A triangular arrangement would seamlessly morph into a straight line, then expand into a circle, with each object moving to its new position in synchronized precision. The transformations occurred without any apparent communication delays or coordination errors. Commander Patricia Richardson, a retired Navy pilot with extensive formation flying experience, observed one of the most spectacular multiple craft displays in March 1996. Richardson was positioned on a ridge, approximately 15 miles from the restricted zone, when 7 objects appeared simultaneously above different areas of the base. The objects initially appeared as individual lights, but quickly arranged themselves into a perfect heptagon, a 7-sided geometric figure with each craft positioned at equal distances from a central point. Richardson's military experience allowed her to appreciate the extraordinary precision required for such positioning, particularly at the distances and altitudes involved. The heptagon formation maintained its geometry while performing maneuvers that defied conventional aviation principles. The entire formation rotated around its center, while individual objects orbited their positions within the larger pattern. The effect created a complex dance of lights against the star field, with each craft maintaining its relative position despite the multiple simultaneous movements. Richardson estimated that coordinating such a display would require communication systems with zero latency and flight control computers capable of calculating positional relationships in real time. Even with the most advanced military technology available in 1996, such coordination would have been impossible for human-built aircraft operating independently. The formation concluded with a synchronized departure that violated every principle of physics Richardson understood. All 7 objects accelerated simultaneously in different directions, reaching speeds she estimated exceeded Mach 8 within 3 seconds. The acceleration was perfectly coordinated, with each craft achieving identical velocities despite departing in divergent paths. Electronic surveillance equipment operated by civilian researchers has detected unusual radio and data transmissions during formation encounters. The signals operate on frequencies outside normal aviation allocations and employ encryption methods that resist analysis. Signal characteristics suggest high-speed data streams that might represent position updates, coordination commands, or telemetry from sophisticated automated systems. The bandwidth requirements for coordinating complex formations would necessitate communication systems far more advanced than anything in the acknowledged military inventory. Real-time coordination of multiple fast-moving objects performing precision maneuvers would require data processing capabilities that exceed current supercomputer specifications. Some formation encounters have included interactions with conventional military aircraft. In June 2003, observer teams documented a formation of 4 unknown objects that appeared during a scheduled test flight of a classified military aircraft. The formation maintained positions relative to the military jet, matching its speed and altitude changes with perfect precision. The unknown objects escorted the military aircraft for over 20 minutes, maintaining formation positions that suggested they were observing or monitoring the test flight. When the military jet altered course to avoid the restricted zone boundary, the formation adjusted accordingly, maintaining constant relative positions throughout the encounter. This type of escort behavior implies intelligence and purpose rather than random aerial phenomena. The objects demonstrated awareness of the military aircraft's mission parameters and flight restrictions, suggesting knowledge of human aerospace operations and regulatory constraints. Formation encounters often correlate with significant developments in classified aerospace programs. Multiple craft sightings increased dramatically during periods when new aircraft types were undergoing initial testing at Area 51. The correlation suggests either systematic observation of human technological progress or testing of multiple variants within advanced development programs. The geometric precision of formation flying extends beyond simple positioning. Objects have been observed performing synchronized acceleration and deceleration sequences, with each craft in a formation changing velocity at identical rates and intervals. Such coordination would require propulsion systems with identical performance characteristics and control systems capable of microsecond timing precision. Weather conditions don't appear to affect formation coordination. Multiple craft encounters have been documented during high wind conditions, atmospheric turbulence, and temperature variations that would challenge conventional aircraft formation flying. The unknown objects maintain perfect positioning, regardless of environmental factors that would disrupt normal aerospace operations. The implications of formation flying capabilities are staggering. If the objects represent human technology, they demonstrate advances in artificial intelligence, communication systems, and flight control that exceed publicly acknowledged capabilities by decades. The coordination requirements suggest computer processing power and software sophistication that rivals the most advanced military and civilian systems combined. Alternatively, if the formations represent non-human intelligence, they indicate organized exploration or surveillance activities directed by technological capabilities far beyond current human achievement. The systematic nature of formation encounters suggests long-term observation programs rather than random visitation events. The precision, coordination, and apparent intelligence demonstrated by formation encounters around Area 51 represent perhaps the most compelling evidence that something extraordinary shares the restricted airspace above America's most classified facility. Whether that something originated in human laboratories or arrived from destinations far beyond Earth, the formations continue to challenge every assumption about the limits of flight, coordination, and the possibility that we are not alone in developing technologies that can master the art of controlled atmospheric flight. In the vast desert sky, where individual mysteries become fleet-level demonstrations of impossible capabilities, the formations remind us that the questions surrounding Area 51 extend far beyond single craft or isolated encounters into realms of coordinated intelligence that may reshape our understanding of who controls the airspace above our most guarded secrets. Chapter 10: The Technology Gap, Decades Ahead or Alien. The history of military aviation reveals a consistent pattern. To revolutionary aircraft undergo years of secret testing before the public learns of their existence. The U-2 spy plane flew for over 5 years before its official acknowledgement. The F-117 Nighthawk operated in classified status for nearly a decade. The SR-71 Blackbird remained partially classified even after its retirement. This timeline of secrecy raises a fundamental question about the objects witnessed around Area 51. Are we seeing human technology decades ahead of public disclosure, or something that transcends terrestrial engineering entirely? The classification timeline for military aircraft follows predictable patterns. Initial development occurs under extreme secrecy, with testing conducted at remote facilities like Area 51. Once operational capabilities are proven, limited deployment begins within highly classified programs. Eventually, strategic or political considerations lead to partial disclosure, though full technical details may remain secret for decades longer. Dr. Benjamin Crawford, a former aerospace contractor who worked on classified programs from 1968 to 1994, provides insight into how far ahead military technology typically operates. According to Crawford's analysis, most secret aircraft programs represent advances of 10 to 15 years beyond publicly acknowledged capabilities. Revolutionary breakthroughs might extend this gap to 20 or 25 years, but rarely longer. Crawford's assessment creates a framework for evaluating Area 51 sightings. Objects displaying capabilities that exceed known technology by a reasonable margin could represent classified human programs following historical patterns. But witnesses have consistently described performances that exceed plausible human advancement by decades or centuries. The stealth revolution provides a useful case study. Early stealth research began in the 1940s, with practical applications emerging in the 70s. The F-117 achieved operational status in the early 80s, but wasn't publicly acknowledged until the late 80s. The entire development cycle, from theoretical research to public disclosure, spanned roughly 40 years. Yet stealth technology, however revolutionary, operated within understood principles of physics and engineering. radar-absorbing materials, angular surfaces, and heat signature reduction all represented advances in degree rather than fundamental breakthroughs in the nature of flight itself. The objects reported around Area 51 display characteristics that suggest advances in kind rather than degree: silent hovering without visible propulsion, instantaneous acceleration to hypersonic speeds, and right-angle turns at extreme velocity represent capabilities that transcend incremental improvement of conventional aerospace technology. Colonel Frank Mitchell, who served as a liaison between Area 51 and Pentagon oversight committees during the 1980s, observed the development of several classified aircraft programs. Mitchell's security clearance provided access to long-range development plans and technology roadmaps that projected military capabilities decades into the future. According to Mitchell's recollections, even the most optimistic projections for advanced propulsion research didn't anticipate achieving the capabilities consistently reported by Area 51 witnesses. Anti-gravity systems, field effect propulsion, and inertial dampening remained theoretical concepts with no clear pathway to practical implementation. Mitchell's perspective highlights a critical gap between witnessed capabilities and projected human technological development. If the observed objects represent human technology, they would require breakthroughs that leapfrog decades of anticipated research and development. Such advances would necessitate either revolutionary discoveries or access to technologies developed outside normal human scientific progression. The reverse engineering hypothesis provides one explanation for impossible technological gaps. If alien craft had been recovered and studied at Area 51, human engineers might have gained access to propulsion principles and materials science far beyond terrestrial capabilities. This scenario could explain how human technology might achieve impossible advances within classified timeframes. Historical precedents support the possibility of technology transfer accelerating development. World War II German rocket research provided the foundation for American and Soviet space programs, advancing missile technology by decades within a few years. The transistor, developed at Bell Labs, revolutionized electronics by providing capabilities that vacuum tube technology could never achieve. However, the alleged alien technology at Area 51 would represent a far more dramatic leap than any historical precedent. The gap between conventional propulsion and the witnessed capabilities is comparable to the difference between horse-drawn transportation and jet aircraft. Such advances would require understanding physics principles that human science has not yet discovered. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a theoretical physicist who studied reports of Area 51 phenomena for over 20 years, attempted to model the technological requirements for achieving witnessed capabilities. Martinez's analysis suggested that silent hovering and instantaneous acceleration would require energy sources and control systems beyond current human technological capacity. Martinez's calculations indicated that generating the power required for observed maneuvers would necessitate energy densities exceeding anything achievable with chemical, nuclear, or even theoretical fusion systems. The control systems required for precision formation flying would demand computer processing capabilities that exceed current supercomputer specifications by several orders of magnitude. These requirements suggest that witnessed capabilities either represent misperceptions of conventional technology or access to scientific principles that human research has not yet achieved. The consistency and technical detail of witness reports make systematic misperception unlikely. leaving breakthrough physics as the most plausible explanation. The classification patterns for alleged alien technology would differ significantly from conventional military programs. Rather than following predictable timelines toward eventual disclosure, recovered alien technology might remain permanently classified due to its implications for human understanding of physics, history, and our place in the universe. Some researchers propose that Area 51 serves as a testing ground for hybrid technologies that combine human engineering with alien principles. In this scenario, witnessed craft might represent successful integration of extraterrestrial propulsion systems with terrestrial control and navigation equipment. Such hybrid vehicles could explain reports of objects that display both impossible capabilities and apparent similarities to conventional aircraft design. The hybrid technology theory could account for the evolution of sightings over decades. Early reports might have documented crude attempts to replicate alien systems using human engineering. Later sightings could represent improved integration as human understanding of alien principles advanced. The most recent encounters might show nearly complete mastery of extraterrestrial technology. Economic considerations also influence technology classification timelines. Conventional military aircraft eventually enter production and deployment, requiring substantial financial investment that must be justified to oversight committees and congressional budget processes. Alien-derived technology might remain in pure research status indefinitely, never requiring the economic and political justification that leads to disclosure of conventional programs. The intelligence value of maintaining ambiguity about Area 51 capabilities provides another motive for permanent secrecy. If adversary nations cannot determine whether witnessed objects represent advanced human technology or recovered alien craft, they cannot develop appropriate countermeasures or estimate American technological advantages. Environmental factors at Area 51 create ideal conditions for testing either advanced human technology or alien-derived systems. The controlled airspace, remote location, and established security infrastructure could conceal breakthrough developments regardless of their origin. Whether testing revolutionary human innovations or studying recovered extraterrestrial vehicles, the Nevada facility provides perfect isolation from public observation. The technology gap analysis ultimately leads to profound questions about the nature of scientific progress and the possibility of non-human intelligence. If witnessed capabilities represent human achievement, they indicate breakthrough discoveries that could revolutionize energy, transportation, and our understanding of physics. If they represent alien technology, they confirm that intelligence exists beyond Earth and has developed capabilities that dwarf human scientific achievement. The continuing secrecy surrounding Area 51 ensures that definitive answers remain elusive. Whether the objects in Nevada skies represent human innovation decades ahead of public knowledge or technology from civilizations far older and more advanced than our own, they continue to challenge every assumption about the limits of what is possible and who shares the vast expanse of space above our most closely guarded secrets. Chapter 11: Electromagnetic Anomalies and Equipment Failures. The high desert of Nevada is renowned for its clear air and stable atmospheric conditions, ideal for both astronomical observation and electronic equipment operation. Yet, in the vicinity of Area 51, sensitive instruments behave in ways that defy explanation. Compasses spin wildly without magnetic interference sources. Digital cameras malfunction despite perfect operating conditions. radio equipment produces static and interference patterns that match no known natural phenomena. These electromagnetic anomalies provide some of the most intriguing indirect evidence of extraordinary technology operating in the restricted airspace. Robert Chen, an electronics engineer who specialized in electromagnetic compatibility testing, began documenting equipment failures around Area 51 in 1987. Chen's professional background in identifying and resolving electromagnetic interference gave him unique insight into the anomalies reported by civilian observers. His systematic approach to measuring and cataloging these effects provided the first scientific analysis of the electromagnetic environment surrounding the classified facility. Chen's initial surveys detected ambient electromagnetic field strengths that exceeded normal desert background levels by significant margins. Using calibrated spectrum analyzers, he identified radio frequency emissions on wavelengths that didn't correspond to any authorized civilian or military allocations. The signals displayed characteristics suggesting extremely high-power transmission sources operating according to modulation schemes, unlike conventional communication or radar systems. The correlation between electromagnetic anomalies and visual UFO sightings was remarkably consistent. Chen's instruments detected field strength spikes that preceded unusual aerial phenomena by 15 to 20 minutes. Radio frequency emissions would increase dramatically, followed by reports of strange lights or objects in the restricted airspace. After the visual sightings concluded, electromagnetic readings would gradually return to baseline levels over the course of several hours. Digital equipment proved particularly susceptible to the electromagnetic effects. Cameras equipped with electronic components would experience complete system failures during periods of high field strength. The failures weren't simply interference with image quality, but total electronic shutdown that required battery replacement or extended cooling periods to restore functionality. Dr. Lisa Park, a physicist who studied electromagnetic phenomena at universities before joining Chen's informal research team, analyzed the technical characteristics of equipment failures around Area 51. Park's background in electromagnetic theory allowed her to model the power requirements and frequency characteristics that could produce the observed effects on civilian electronics. Park's analysis indicated that the electromagnetic emissions required power levels measured in megawatts rather than the kilowatts typical of conventional military equipment. The frequency characteristics suggested broadband transmission across multiple spectral bands simultaneously, a technique that would require sophisticated signal generation equipment far beyond anything in the civilian electronics industry. Vehicle electrical systems experience some of the most dramatic electromagnetic effects. Multiple witnesses reported complete engine shutdown during close encounters with unidentified objects. Unlike typical automotive electrical problems, these failures affected multiple systems simultaneously: ignition, lighting, instrumentation, and even mechanical components like power steering and braking systems that relied on electronic control modules. Mark Thompson, a master automotive technician with over 20 years of experience, investigated several vehicle failure incidents that occurred near Area 51 between 1992 and 1998. Thompson's diagnostic equipment detected electromagnetic pulse effects that had damaged semiconductors throughout affected vehicles' electronic systems. The damage patterns were unlike anything Thompson had encountered in normal automotive repair. The electromagnetic pulses appeared to have induced current surges that exceeded the design tolerances of protected electronic components. Military-grade electronics are typically hardened against electromagnetic pulse effects, but civilian automotive systems lack such protection and would be vulnerable to sufficiently powerful electromagnetic fields. Thompson's analysis suggested that the electromagnetic emissions around Area 51 operated at power levels comparable to military electronic warfare systems designed to disable enemy electronics. However, the frequency characteristics and modulation patterns didn't match any known electronic warfare equipment in the American military inventory. Radio communication equipment experienced interference patterns that defied conventional electromagnetic theory. Rather than simple noise or jamming, witnesses reported structured interference that seemed to respond to their transmission attempts. When observers attempted to communicate via radio during UFO sightings, they often received responses on the same frequencies using similar transmission characteristics but containing no intelligible content. Amateur radio operator Janet Miller documented these communication anomalies during a 15-year observation period from 1985 to 2000. Miller's station was equipped with high-gain antennas and sensitive receivers that could detect weak signals across a broad frequency spectrum. Her logs recorded over 40 instances of structured radio interference that coincided with visual UFO sightings near Area 51. Miller's recordings captured interference patterns that displayed characteristics suggesting intelligent origin rather than random electromagnetic noise. The signals would begin as simple pulses, evolve into complex modulation patterns, then conclude with transmission sequences that seemed to mirror the observer's original radio activity. The effect suggested either sophisticated signal processing equipment or intelligence capable of analyzing and responding to human radio communications in real time. Compass anomalies provided another category of electromagnetic evidence. Magnetic compasses in the vicinity of Area 51 would deflect from magnetic north during periods of unusual aerial activity. The deflections weren't random but followed patterns that suggested localized magnetic field disturbances of extraordinary intensity. Geophysicist Dr. Richard Hayes studied compass anomalies reported by observers between 1990 and 2005. Hayes's analysis indicated that the magnetic field disturbances required current flows measured in millions of amperes, far exceeding anything achievable with conventional electromagnetic equipment. The field patterns suggested circular current loops of enormous diameter, possibly generated by unknown propulsion systems operating according to electromagnetic principles. Hayes's calculations indicated that objects generating such magnetic field disturbances would need to carry electrical currents comparable to those found in major power generation facilities. The power requirements for sustaining such currents in mobile vehicles would exceed anything achievable with known energy storage or generation technology. Timing equipment and atomic clocks reported additional anomalies during electromagnetic events around Area 51. Precision time references would show inexplicable variations that couldn't be attributed to atmospheric conditions, temperature changes, or electronic interference. The timing anomalies suggested gravitational effects or space-time distortions that could influence the fundamental physical processes underlying atomic clock operation. Dr. Patricia Wong, a former researcher at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, analyzed timing anomalies reported by observers using GPS receivers and atomic time references near Area 51. Wong's analysis indicated that the timing variations exceeded any known electromagnetic effects on precision timing equipment. Wong's theoretical analysis suggested that gravitational field fluctuations or space-time geometry distortions could produce the observed timing anomalies. Such effects would require energy manipulation on scales comparable to stellar processes, far beyond any known human technology. The timing variations provided indirect evidence of propulsion systems that might operate by manipulating fundamental physical fields rather than conventional thrust generation. The electromagnetic evidence surrounding Area 51 presents a compelling case for technology that operates according to principles beyond current human capability. The power requirements, frequency characteristics, and field effects suggest propulsion and control systems that transcend conventional aerospace engineering. Whether these systems represent revolutionary human breakthroughs or technology derived from non-terrestrial sources, they demonstrate capabilities that could revolutionize human understanding of electromagnetic theory and its applications. The consistent correlation between electromagnetic anomalies and visual UFO sightings provides objective, measurable evidence that extraordinary technology operates within the restricted airspace above Area 51. Unlike subjective visual observations, electromagnetic effects can be documented with scientific instruments and analyzed according to established physical principles. The electromagnetic footprint of the objects observed around Area 51 suggests technology that harnesses fundamental forces on scales that dwarf conventional engineering capabilities. Whether human or alien in origin, such technology represents a quantum leap in electromagnetic manipulation that could transform energy, transportation, and communication systems beyond anything currently imagined. In the invisible spectrum of electromagnetic radiation that surrounds all electronic activity, the Nevada desert carries signatures of technology that challenges every assumption about the limits of electromagnetic engineering and the possibilities that may exist within the classified world of America's most secret aerospace facility. Chapter 12, The Sound of Silence, Acoustic Mysteries. In the realm of physics, few laws seem as absolute as those governing sound production by moving objects. Aircraft traveling through atmosphere must displace air molecules, creating pressure waves that manifest as sound. At supersonic speeds, these pressure waves accumulate into shock fronts that produce sonic booms audible for miles. Yet witnesses around Area 51 consistently report objects moving at extraordinary velocities in complete silence, challenging fundamental principles of acoustic physics. The acoustic signature of conventional aircraft provides reliable indicators of their size, speed, and propulsion systems. Jet engines produce distinctive frequency spectrums based on turbine blade rates and combustion characteristics. Propellers generate sound patterns related to blade number and rotational velocity. Even gliders create acoustic signatures from air moving over their surfaces. These acoustic laws appear universal, applying to everything from insects to supersonic jets. Dr. Amanda Roberts, an acoustics engineer who specialized in aircraft noise analysis for the Federal Aviation Administration, became intrigued by reports of silent supersonic objects after her retirement in 1998. Roberts had spent 30 years measuring and modeling aircraft acoustic signatures, developing expertise that allowed her to identify aircraft types purely by their sound characteristics. Roberts's analysis of witness reports from Area 51 revealed acoustic anomalies that defied her understanding of aeroacoustics. Multiple credible observers described objects traveling at speeds that should have produced devastating sonic booms, yet these craft moved in complete silence. The witnesses included pilots, air traffic controllers, and aerospace engineers whose professional backgrounds made acoustic misidentification unlikely. The physics of supersonic flight dictates that objects exceeding the speed of sound must produce shock waves. These pressure disturbances propagate through the atmosphere as acoustic energy, creating the characteristic double crack of sonic booms. The intensity of sonic booms correlates directly with object size, speed, and altitude, following mathematical relationships that have never shown exceptions in over a century of supersonic flight experience. Roberts calculated that objects of the size and speed described by Area 51 witnesses should produce sonic booms with intensity levels exceeding 100 decibels at ground level. Such acoustic events would be audible across hundreds of square miles and would leave unmistakable evidence of their occurrence. The complete absence of sonic boom reports during silent supersonic sightings presented a paradox that conventional acoustic theory couldn't explain. Sound suppression technology exists within certain parameters, but the techniques have fundamental limitations. Military stealth aircraft employ exhaust nozzle designs and flight profile optimization to reduce acoustic signatures, but cannot eliminate sound entirely. Even the most advanced noise reduction systems can only attenuate sound levels, rather than achieving true silence during high-speed flight. Professor Michael Chen, who directed acoustic research at a major aerospace university from 1985 to 2010, studied theoretical approaches to acoustic signature reduction. Chen's research explored exotic concepts, including active noise cancellation for aircraft, phase-inverse acoustic generation, and boundary layer manipulation for sound reduction. Chen's theoretical analysis indicated that achieving true silence during supersonic flight would require acoustic control technologies far beyond current human capability. Active noise cancellation systems would need to generate sound waves precisely matched to aircraft acoustic signatures across enormous three-dimensional volumes. The power requirements and computational complexity of such systems exceeded anything achievable with known technology. Alternative explanations for silent supersonic flight involved fundamental modifications to the physics of object-atmosphere interaction. Theoretical concepts, such as electromagnetic field manipulation, could potentially create boundary conditions that altered normal acoustic wave generation. Objects surrounded by controlled electromagnetic fields might interact with atmospheric molecules differently than conventional aircraft. The electromagnetic field theory gained credibility when correlated with the electromagnetic anomalies documented around Area 51. If unknown objects generated powerful electromagnetic fields as part of their propulsion systems, these fields might incidentally affect acoustic wave propagation in ways that conventional acoustic theory doesn't predict. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the theoretical physicist who had studied electromagnetic effects around Area 51, expanded her research to include acoustic implications of exotic propulsion systems. Martinez's analysis suggested that sufficiently intense electromagnetic fields could create plasma sheaths around moving objects, potentially altering their acoustic signatures through mechanisms unknown to conventional aeroacoustics. Martinez's plasma sheath theory proposed that electromagnetic fields might ionize atmospheric molecules around high-speed objects, creating regions of ionized gas that could absorb or redirect acoustic energy. The plasma layer would act as an acoustic barrier, preventing pressure waves from propagating outward as normal sound or sonic booms. The energy requirements for maintaining plasma sheaths around large objects moving at supersonic speeds would be enormous, requiring power generation capabilities far exceeding conventional aircraft systems. However, the electromagnetic anomalies documented around Area 51 suggested that unknown objects possessed exactly such extraordinary power sources. Acoustic monitoring equipment operated by civilian researchers detected unusual sound patterns during periods of silent supersonic sightings. Rather than the absence of all acoustic activity, sensitive microphones recorded extremely low-frequency vibrations that seemed to correlate with visual observations of high-speed objects. James Wilson, an audio engineer who specialized in subsonic frequency analysis, documented these acoustic anomalies using professional-grade recording equipment positioned at legal observation points around Area 51. Wilson's recordings captured infrasonic frequencies below the threshold of human hearing that accompanied reports of silent, supersonic objects. Wilson's analysis revealed that the infrasonic signatures had characteristics unlike any natural atmospheric phenomena or conventional aircraft acoustic signatures. The frequencies were too low for normal aerodynamic sound generation and too structured for random atmospheric noise. The patterns suggested acoustic energy being generated through unknown mechanisms operating at frequencies below conventional acoustic detection thresholds. The infrasonic evidence provided a possible explanation for reports of silent supersonic flight. Objects might be generating acoustic energy at frequencies below human hearing perception, creating the impression of silence while actually producing substantial sound energy in spectral ranges that conventional acoustic monitoring doesn't typically examine. However, infrasonic explanation raised additional questions about the propulsion mechanisms of unknown objects. Conventional aircraft don't produce significant infrasonic emissions during normal flight operations. Generating structured infrasonic patterns would require propulsion or control systems operating according to principles that don't match any known aerospace technology. Gravitational field manipulation, a theoretical propulsion concept sometimes associated with UFO reports, could potentially explain both silent operation and infrasonic generation. Objects that achieved propulsion through gravitational field control rather than conventional thrust might interact with atmospheric molecules differently than conventional aircraft. Gravitational propulsion theory suggests that objects could achieve motion by manipulating space-time geometry rather than pushing against atmospheric molecules. Such objects might move through atmosphere without generating traditional pressure waves, potentially explaining reports of silent operation at extreme velocities. The acoustic evidence surrounding Area 51 suggests technology that transcends conventional understanding of object-atmosphere interaction. Whether through electromagnetic field manipulation, gravitational control, or unknown physics principles, the reported silent operation of supersonic objects indicates propulsion systems that operate according to rules far different from conventional aerospace engineering. The correlation between acoustic anomalies and other extraordinary characteristics reported around Area 50 strengthens the case for revolutionary technology operating within the restricted airspace. Silent supersonic flight, electromagnetic effects, and impossible maneuvers form a pattern of capabilities that suggest unified technological principles underlying all observed phenomena. The acoustic mysteries of Area 51 remind us that sound, like light and electromagnetic radiation carries information about the physical processes that generate it. The absence of expected acoustic signatures, combined with the presence of unexpected infrasonic patterns, tells a story of technology that challenges fundamental assumptions about flight, propulsion, and the relationship between moving objects and the medium through which they travel. In the vast silence of the Nevada desert, where sound carries for miles through thin, dry air, the acoustic shadows cast by unknown objects provide some of the most compelling evidence that something extraordinary shares the skies above America's most classified facility, moving according to principles that rewrite the basic rules of how objects interact with Earth's atmosphere. Chapter 13: Weather or Warfare, Environmental Effects. The high desert of Nevada is renowned for its predictable weather patterns. Clear skies, low humidity, and stable atmospheric conditions make the region ideal for aerospace testing and astronomical observation. Yet observers around Area 51 have documented environmental anomalies that suggest the presence of technology capable of affecting weather, atmospheric chemistry, and even local wildlife behavior in ways that challenge our understanding of how advanced systems might interact with natural environments. Meteorologist Dr. Rachel Thompson first noticed unusual weather patterns around Area 51 during her analysis of regional climate data in 1991. Thompson, who had spent 15 years studying southwestern atmospheric conditions for the National Weather Service, identified localized weather phenomena that didn't correlate with broader regional patterns or natural atmospheric processes. Thompson's analysis revealed instances of rapid temperature fluctuations, isolated cloud formations, and atmospheric pressure variations that occurred within specific geographic boundaries around the restricted zone. These anomalies were too localized and precisely bounded to represent natural weather events, yet too consistent and structured to result from conventional military activities. The temperature anomalies were particularly striking. Thompson documented cases where ambient air temperature dropped by 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit within minutes, affecting areas of only a few square miles while surrounding regions remained stable. The cooling events would persist for 30 to 40 minutes before temperatures gradually returned to normal levels. The rapid cooling couldn't be explained by conventional meteorological processes. Natural temperature changes of such magnitude require large-scale atmospheric movements or significant altitude changes that would affect much broader geographic areas. The localized nature of the cooling suggested artificial influence on atmospheric conditions within the restricted airspace. Cloud formation anomalies provided additional evidence of environmental manipulation. Observers documented instances of clouds appearing suddenly in clear skies, forming geometric patterns that defied natural atmospheric dynamics. These artificial-looking formations would maintain precise shapes and boundaries for extended periods before dissipating as rapidly as they had formed. Professional photographer and weather enthusiast David Martinez documented over 50 instances of unusual cloud formations around Area 51 between 1988 and 2003. Martinez's time-lapse photography captured cloud development sequences that violated normal atmospheric physics. Martinez's images showed clouds forming in perfect circles, straight lines, and geometric patterns that natural wind and pressure systems cannot create. The formations would appear at specific altitudes and maintain their artificial geometry despite prevailing winds that should have dispersed and distorted them within minutes. The precise geometric nature of these cloud formations suggested active control rather than natural atmospheric processes. Creating and maintaining such patterns would require technology capable of manipulating atmospheric moisture, temperature, and pressure with extraordinary precision across large volumes of air. Electromagnetic effects on local wildlife provided another category of environmental anomaly. Ranchers and wildlife biologists working in areas adjacent to the restricted zone reported behavioral changes in animals that correlated with periods of unusual aerial activity around Area 51. Dr. Patricia Adams, a wildlife biologist who studied desert ecosystems for over 20 years, documented animal behavior anomalies that occurred during reported UFO activity. Adams's research focused on the electromagnetic sensitivity of various species and how artificial electromagnetic fields might affect natural animal navigation and behavior systems. Adams's observations revealed that migratory birds would alter their flight paths to avoid areas where unusual aerial phenomena had been reported. Domestic animals, including cattle and horses, would display agitation and disorientation during periods of high UFO activity. Even insects showed behavioral changes, with some species avoiding areas where electromagnetic anomalies had been detected. The animal behavior evidence suggested that unknown objects generated electromagnetic fields intense enough to interfere with natural bioelectric navigation systems. Many species rely on Earth's magnetic field for orientation and migration, and sufficiently powerful artificial electromagnetic sources could disrupt these natural guidance systems. Ground-level atmospheric effects provided additional evidence of environmental manipulation. Witnesses reported experiencing unusual sensations during close encounters with unknown objects, including static electricity buildup, metallic tastes, and temporary respiratory irritation that suggested chemical changes in local air composition. Environmental chemist Dr. Stephen Lee analyzed air samples collected during periods of unusual atmospheric activity around Area 51. Lee's analysis detected trace compounds that didn't occur naturally in desert atmospheric chemistry and couldn't be attributed to conventional military aircraft operations. The chemical anomalies included elevated levels of ozone and other reactive oxygen species that would normally result from high-energy electrical discharges or plasma generation. The concentrations were too high for natural atmospheric processes, but consistent with artificial plasma production or high-voltage electromagnetic systems. Lee's findings suggested that unknown objects might generate plasma fields or electrical discharges as part of their propulsion or control systems. Such effects would explain both the chemical anomalies and the electromagnetic impacts on wildlife behavior documented by other researchers. Seismic monitoring equipment detected low-frequency vibrations that accompanied periods of unusual aerial activity. These vibrations weren't typical of aircraft operations or conventional military testing, but rather resembled the signatures of large-scale electromagnetic or gravitational field generation. Dr. Michael Roberts, a seismologist who operated monitoring stations throughout southern Nevada, documented correlations between unusual aerial sightings and subsurface vibration patterns. Roberts' equipment detected low-frequency waves that seemed to originate from points within the restricted airspace and propagate outward through both atmosphere and ground. The seismic signatures were unlike anything Roberts had encountered in his studies of natural earthquakes, underground nuclear testing, or conventional military activities. The patterns suggested energy sources operating according to principles that didn't match known seismic generation mechanisms. Roberts's analysis indicated that the vibration sources operated in frequency ranges associated with gravitational wave detection equipment. While far too weak to represent actual gravitational waves, the patterns suggested energy manipulation on scales that conventional technology couldn't achieve. Vegetation effects provided long-term evidence of environmental impacts from unknown technology. Botanists and agricultural specialists documented areas where plant growth patterns suggested exposure to unusual radiation or electromagnetic fields over extended periods. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a plant physiologist who studied desert vegetation adaptation, identified zones around Area 51 where native plant species displayed growth anomalies consistent with chronic electromagnetic field exposure. The affected vegetation showed cellular structure changes and biochemical modifications that natural environmental stresses couldn't explain. Walsh's research indicated that sustained electromagnetic field exposure had altered normal plant development processes in predictable ways. The patterns suggested that unknown technology had been operating in specific areas for years or decades, creating cumulative environmental effects that persisted long after individual sightings. The agricultural implications extended to nearby ranching operations, where livestock and crops displayed health and growth characteristics that didn't correlate with natural environmental factors. Ranchers reported improved animal health and crop yields in some areas, while other zones showed negative effects that suggested exposure to harmful radiation or electromagnetic fields. Atmospheric ionization provided another measurable environmental effect. Scientific instruments detected elevated ion concentrations in air masses that had passed over areas of unusual aerial activity. The ionization levels exceeded those created by natural atmospheric processes or conventional aircraft operations. The ionization patterns were consistent with high-energy propulsion systems that might create plasma discharges or manipulate atmospheric electrical properties. Such effects would explain many of the other environmental anomalies, from electromagnetic impacts on wildlife to chemical changes in air composition. The environmental evidence surrounding Area 51 suggests that unknown technology operates according to principles that create measurable impacts on natural systems. Whether these effects result from exotic propulsion systems, electromagnetic control mechanisms, or gravitational field manipulation, they demonstrate that extraordinary technology leaves detectable traces in the environment where it operates. The correlation between environmental anomalies and visual UFO sightings provides objective evidence that supports witness reports of unusual aerial phenomena. Unlike subjective visual observations, environmental effects can be measured with scientific instruments and analyzed according to established physical and chemical principles. The environmental footprint of unknown technology around Area 51 indicates systems that interact with natural processes on scales far exceeding conventional aerospace engineering. Whether human or alien in origin, such technology represents capabilities that could revolutionize our understanding of how advanced systems might coexist with and influence natural environmental processes. In the delicate balance of desert ecosystems, where every environmental factor affects the survival of adapted species, the technological signatures detected around Area 51 remind us that advanced technology inevitably leaves traces in the natural world, providing a scientific pathway toward understanding capabilities that remain hidden from direct observation. Chapter 14: Modern Surveillance and recent sightings. The digital revolution has transformed UFO research around Area 51 in ways that earlier generations of observers could never have imagined. High-resolution digital cameras, sophisticated night vision equipment, and commercially available satellite imagery have given civilian researchers capabilities that once belonged exclusively to military and intelligence agencies. Yet, paradoxically, this technological advancement has made the mystery deeper rather than resolving it. In the 1980s and 90s, UFO researchers relied on film cameras with limited telephoto capabilities and basic night vision equipment adapted from military surplus. Documentation was expensive, time-consuming, and often technically inadequate for scientific analysis. Researchers had to choose their shots carefully, knowing that each frame of film represented significant cost and limited opportunity. The transition to digital photography in the early 2000s changed everything. Digital cameras could capture hundreds of images without additional cost, store them for immediate review, and transmit them instantly across global networks. High-resolution sensors could resolve details invisible to the human eye, while advanced image stabilization systems enabled clear photography of distant objects. Professional photographer and longtime Area 51 researcher Michael Stevens documented this technological transition during his 25-year observation period from 1995 to 2020. Stevens' equipment evolved from basic 35mm film cameras to sophisticated digital systems capable of resolving objects at distances exceeding 30 miles. Stevens' modern equipment included cameras with sensors exceeding 50 megapixels, telephoto lenses with focal lengths approaching 2000 millimeters, and computerized tracking systems that could follow fast-moving objects across the sky while maintaining perfect focus. His night vision capabilities included third-generation image intensifiers and thermal imaging systems that could detect heat signatures in complete darkness. Despite these technological advances, Stevens found that clear, unambiguous documentation of unusual phenomena became more elusive rather than more common. Objects that appeared distinct to the naked eye would become indistinct blurs when captured with high-resolution equipment. Thermal signatures that suggested structured craft would resolve into ambiguous heat patterns that could represent natural atmospheric phenomena. The smartphone revolution of the late 2000s put high-quality cameras in the hands of millions of potential witnesses. Every tourist, researcher, and casual observer carried equipment capable of capturing high-definition video with instant global distribution capability. Social media platforms provided immediate channels for sharing unusual sightings with worldwide audiences. Yet, the proliferation of camera-equipped smartphones has not produced the flood of clear UFO documentation that researchers expected. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a digital imaging specialist who studied UFO photography from 2005 to 2015, analyzed over 3,000 images and videos submitted by civilian observers around Area 51 during the smartphone era. Martinez's analysis revealed that modern digital sensors, despite their technical sophistication, faced unique challenges when documenting unusual aerial phenomena. High-resolution sensors were more sensitive to atmospheric distortion, heat shimmer, and digital noise that could obscure or distort distant objects. Automatic exposure and focus systems, optimized for conventional photography, often failed when confronted with objects that didn't conform to normal reflectivity or movement patterns. The digital compression algorithms used by smartphones and social media platforms introduced additional complications. Video compression systems designed to optimize file sizes for network transmission would eliminate visual information that human observers considered significant. Objects that appeared clearly defined in person would become pixelated artifacts in compressed digital formats. Satellite imagery provided another dimension to modern surveillance capabilities. Commercial satellite services offered high-resolution images of Area 51 that civilian researchers could purchase and analyze. These orbital perspectives revealed details of base construction, aircraft movements, and ground activities that had previously been invisible to Earth-based observers. However, satellite surveillance also revealed the sophisticated counter-surveillance measures employed by Area 51 security. Activities were carefully timed to avoid satellite passes, and critical operations occurred only during periods when commercial imaging satellites were not positioned to observe the restricted zone. The base's security had evolved to account for modern surveillance capabilities. Dr. Robert Chen, a former intelligence analyst who studied satellite imagery of Area 51 from 2010 to 2020, documented the cat-and-mouse relationship between civilian surveillance and base security. Chen's analysis revealed that unusual aerial activity occurred almost exclusively during satellite blind spots, when commercial imaging platforms could not observe the restricted airspace. Chen's research indicated that base operations followed precisely calculated schedules that maximized security while accommodating the orbital mechanics of civilian surveillance satellites. The timing suggested access to detailed satellite tracking data and sophisticated operational planning that anticipated civilian monitoring capabilities. Night vision technology advancement provided new capabilities for observing nocturnal activities around Area 51. Third-generation image intensifiers could detect starlight-level illumination with sufficient clarity to identify aircraft types and formation patterns. Thermal imaging systems could track objects by their heat signatures rather than relying on visible light. Professional researcher and former military officer Sarah Williams employed advanced night vision systems during her observation campaigns from 2012 to 2018. Williams's equipment included military-grade thermal imaging cameras capable of detecting temperature differences of less than 1 degree Celsius at distances exceeding 20 miles. Williams' thermal imaging documentation revealed that unusual objects around Area 51 displayed heat signatures unlike any conventional aircraft. Some objects appeared as perfect geometric shapes with uniform temperature distribution, lacking the hotspots characteristic of jet engines, exhaust systems, or aerodynamic heating. Others showed temperature patterns that suggested internal heat sources operating according to unknown principles. The integration of multiple surveillance technologies created comprehensive monitoring systems that previous generations of researchers couldn't achieve. Modern observation posts combined high-resolution optical cameras, thermal imaging, night vision, electromagnetic spectrum analyzers, and communication intercept equipment into integrated platforms that could document phenomena across multiple sensing modalities simultaneously. Yet, comprehensive documentation created new challenges for analysis and verification. Modern surveillance systems generated vast quantities of data that required sophisticated analysis techniques to extract meaningful patterns. The complexity of multimodal sensor data often obscured rather than clarified the nature of observed phenomena. Social media and internet platforms transformed the distribution and analysis of UFO documentation. Images and videos could reach global audiences within minutes of capture, enabling real-time collaborative analysis by researchers worldwide. Online communities developed sophisticated techniques for image authentication, metadata analysis, and collaborative investigation. However, the democratization of UFO documentation also introduced problems of verification and authenticity. Digital manipulation tools became increasingly sophisticated, making it difficult to distinguish authentic documentation from fabricated content. The viral nature of social media distribution often prioritized sensational content over careful analysis. Dr. Lisa Park, a computer scientist who specialized in digital forensics, studied the authentication challenges facing modern UFO research from 2015 to 2020. Park's analysis revealed that even sophisticated authentication techniques struggled to verify the authenticity of digital UFO documentation, particularly when dealing with phenomena that didn't conform to conventional imaging expectations. Park's research indicated that the same digital technologies that enabled unprecedented documentation capabilities also created unprecedented opportunities for deception and misinterpretation. The challenge for modern UFO research was not gathering data, but developing reliable methods for distinguishing authentic phenomena from digital artifacts, natural atmospheric effects, and deliberate fabrications. The electronic warfare implications of modern surveillance created additional complications. Area 51 security employed sophisticated electronic countermeasures designed to interfere with unauthorized surveillance equipment. Digital cameras could malfunction due to electromagnetic interference, satellite communications could be jammed, and internet uploads could be disrupted during periods of sensitive activities. Recent sightings in the smartphone era maintained many characteristics of historical encounters while adapting to modern surveillance challenges. Objects continued to display impossible flight characteristics, but their appearances seemed calibrated to avoid clear documentation by modern digital sensors. The phenomena appeared to evolve alongside human surveillance technology, maintaining just enough ambiguity to avoid definitive proof. The modern surveillance era around Area 51 demonstrates that technological advancement alone cannot resolve the fundamental mysteries surrounding unusual aerial phenomena. While digital age tools provide unprecedented capabilities for detection and documentation, they also reveal the sophisticated nature of whatever intelligence manages the phenomena, whether human or otherwise. The proliferation of surveillance technology has not eliminated the mystery of Area 51, but rather transformed it into a more complex puzzle that adapts and evolves alongside human capabilities, maintaining its secrets despite the most advanced civilian monitoring systems ever deployed against it. Chapter 15: The Eternal Question: Secret or Extraterrestrial? After decades of sightings, testimonies, and accumulated evidence, the fundamental question surrounding Area 51 remains as compelling as ever. Are we witnessing the testing of revolutionary human technology, or something that transcends terrestrial engineering entirely? The evidence points in multiple directions, creating a mystery that resists simple resolution while demanding careful consideration of possibilities that challenge our understanding of technology, physics, and our place in the universe. The case for advanced human technology rests on solid historical precedent. Area 51 has served as the testing ground for aircraft that were decades ahead of public knowledge when first developed. The U-2 spy plane, the A-12 Oxcart, and the F-117 Nighthawk all demonstrated capabilities that would have seemed impossible to observers unfamiliar with classified aerospace development programs. This pattern of technological advancement suggests that some witnessed phenomena around Area 51 could represent the next generation of human aerospace achievement. Black projects operating under extreme classification might have achieved breakthroughs in propulsion, materials, science, and flight control that exceed public expectations by substantial margins. Dr. Robert Mitchell, who served as a consultant to various aerospace contractors from 1975 to 2010, provides insight into the potential scope of classified development programs. Mitchell's security clearances allowed him access to long-range technology development plans that projected human capabilities decades into the future. According to Mitchell's analysis, certain theoretical propulsion concepts have shown sufficient promise to warrant substantial research investment. Electromagnetic field manipulation, plasma-based propulsion, and exotic energy sources represent areas where breakthrough discoveries could produce aircraft with capabilities resembling those reported around Area 51. Mitchell's perspective suggests that the impossible maneuvers, silent operation, and electromagnetic effects witnessed around the Nevada facility could result from successful development of propulsion technologies that remain decades away from public disclosure. In this scenario, Area 51 serves its historical role as a testing ground for revolutionary aircraft that push the boundaries of human aerospace engineering. The expansion of Area 51 facilities supports the advanced human technology hypothesis. Satellite imagery reveals continuous construction of new hangars, extended runways, and underground facilities that suggest ongoing development programs of substantial scope and budget. Such investment implies successful technology development that warrants continued research and testing. However, the alternative explanation cannot be dismissed based on available evidence. The characteristics consistently reported around Area 51 exceed plausible human technological advancement by margins that suggest principles unknown to terrestrial science. The instantaneous acceleration, impossible maneuvers, and apparent disregard for fundamental physics laws point toward capabilities that transcend current human understanding. Dr. Sarah Chen, a theoretical physicist who studied reports of Area 51 phenomena for over 20 years, analyzed the energy and control requirements for achieving witnessed capabilities. Chen's calculations indicated that the reported performances would require technological advances that exceed reasonable extrapolations from current human scientific knowledge. Chen's analysis suggested that silent supersonic flight, instantaneous directional changes, and sustained hovering without visible propulsion would necessitate breakthroughs in multiple scientific disciplines simultaneously. The probability of achieving such comprehensive advances through conventional research and development appeared extremely low within the observed timeframes. The consistency of witness reports across multiple decades provides compelling evidence for extraordinary technology, regardless of its origin. Pilots, engineers, radar operators, and other technically qualified observers have described similar capabilities spanning over 50 years of sightings around Area 51. This consistency extends beyond individual testimonies to include electromagnetic effects, acoustic anomalies, and environmental impacts that correlate with visual observations. The multimodal nature of the evidence suggests genuine phenomena rather than misperception, hoax, or conventional aircraft misidentification. The intelligence community's response to Area 51 speculation has evolved significantly since the facility's initial establishment. Early official denials have given way to selective acknowledgement of historical aircraft testing while maintaining complete silence regarding current operations or unusual phenomena. This shifting approach to disclosure suggests awareness that some aspects of Area 51 operations cannot be permanently concealed, while other elements require continued secrecy. The pattern implies a hierarchy of classification where conventional aircraft testing might eventually be acknowledged while more sensitive programs remain permanently protected. The recent increase in official UFO acknowledgement by military and intelligence agencies adds another dimension to the Area 51 mystery. Declassified videos and official statements regarding unidentified aerial phenomena indicate institutional awareness that something extraordinary operates in controlled airspace. However, official acknowledgement of UFO reality doesn't necessarily validate extraterrestrial origin theories. Advanced foreign technology, breakthrough American developments, or phenomena of unknown origin could all produce officially acknowledged, unidentified aerial phenomena without confirming alien visitation. The technological evolution observed around Area 51 suggests adaptation and improvement over time rather than static capabilities. Early sightings from the 1950s and 60s described relatively simple, unusual behaviors. More recent encounters include complex formation flying, sophisticated electromagnetic effects, and apparent responsiveness to human surveillance efforts. This evolutionary pattern could indicate either progressive mastery of recovered alien technology or successive generations of advanced human aerospace development. Both explanations remain consistent with observed technological progression over multiple decades. The global context of UFO sightings provides additional perspective on the Area 51 phenomena. Similar unusual aerial capabilities have been reported worldwide, often in locations with no connection to American military facilities. This broader pattern suggests either widespread deployment of advanced technology or a phenomenon that transcends national boundaries and terrestrial origins. The environmental and electromagnetic effects documented around Area 51 indicate technology that operates according to principles far beyond conventional aerospace engineering. Whether these effects result from human scientific breakthroughs or represent applications of non-terrestrial physics remains an open question with profound implications. The security measures surrounding Area 51 exceed those employed for conventional classified programs. The permanent, restricted airspace, comprehensive electronic surveillance, and decades-long information control suggest protection of assets or capabilities that transcend normal military classification requirements. Such extreme security could protect revolutionary human technology with strategic implications far beyond conventional weapons systems. Alternatively, it could conceal evidence or technology that would fundamentally alter human understanding of physics, history, and our relationship to the broader universe. The civilian research community continues to document anomalous phenomena around Area 51, despite technological countermeasures and legal restrictions. The persistence of unusual sightings across multiple generations of observers suggests genuine phenomena rather than temporary experimental programs or systematic deception. Modern surveillance capabilities have revealed the sophisticated nature of whatever produces the observed phenomena. Objects display apparent awareness of human monitoring capabilities and adapt their behavior to avoid definitive documentation while maintaining just enough visibility to perpetuate the mystery. The enduring nature of the Area 51 enigma reflects deeper questions about the limits of human knowledge and the possibility that our understanding of physics, technology, and intelligence may be incomplete. Whether the phenomena represent human achievement or something beyond terrestrial capability, they challenge fundamental assumptions about what is possible. The skies above Area 51 remain a frontier where human ambition encounters the unknown. Whether that unknown represents the cutting edge of human innovation or evidence of intelligence far older and more advanced than our own, it continues to remind us that mystery persists even in an age of unprecedented technological capability. In the vast expanse of Nevada desert, beneath stars that have witnessed the entire span of human civilization, the eternal question endures. As long as objects move through restricted airspace displaying impossible capabilities, as long as electromagnetic anomalies suggest technology beyond current understanding, the mystery will persist, drawing our eyes skyward toward possibilities that may reshape everything we think we know about flight, physics, and our place in a universe that may be far more complex and populated than we dare imagine. The answer, when it comes, will likely be more extraordinary than either conventional military technology or simple alien visitation. In the meantime, the desert keeps its secrets, and the skies above America's most classified facility continue to challenge the boundaries between the possible and the impossible, the known and the unknowable. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the restricted skies above Area 51. Until next time,